At the front door of my house hangs a screen woven from thin split reeds, about as wide as the doorway and a little taller than a man. I paid less for it than you would pay for 2 coffees at a train station, about $7. Every morning, before the sun has cleared the ridge of the mountain across the valley, I fill a wooden dipper from the rain barrel and throw the water out across the stone of my entryway in one long, low arc. I throw a little up onto that reed screen too, until it is damp clear through. Then I go and make my tea. By 2 in the afternoon, and the afternoons where I live are some of the hottest in all of Japan. We have recorded days here in Gifu over 40 degrees, which is past 104 of your Fahrenheit. The air that wants to come into my house has to lift up off that wet stone and pass through that damp reed screen before it ever reaches me. And it comes through cooler, not by a machine, not by a wire, by water and reeds and a little shade, the way it has been done in this country for longer than anyone bothered to write down. My name is Kenji Mori. I live in an old farmhouse, we call it a kominka, that my great-grandfather's family raised in a mountain valley in Gifu Prefecture. The house has stood through more than 120 summers. I have lived in it most of my life, and I have never once owned an air conditioner. Not because I could not buy one, because I have never needed one. On the worst night of August, when the whole valley lies under wet heat like a soaked blanket, the room where I sleep on the floor stays cooler than the bedroom of a man 2 hours from here in his sealed concrete apartment, paying every month for a machine that runs all night and still loses. I am going to tell you exactly how. I am going to tell you what costs $7, where to put it, and in what order to do it. And then I am going to tell you the part that should make you a little angry, which is that none of this is hidden. It is not a secret. It was written down in this country 700 years ago by a monk in a book children still read in school. You were simply never told because there is no money in a wet reed screen. Stay with me. The first thing you have to understand is that your house and mine are trying to do 2 completely opposite things, and only one of them works in real heat. Your house is trying to seal the heat out and then fight whatever gets in with a machine. My house is trying to let the heat pass straight through and leave. That is the whole difference. Everything else follows from it. Most of you have been taught to think of cooling as something you make, a cold thing you generate in a box and blow into a room. That is one way. It is an expensive way, and it is a brittle way, because the moment the power stops or the machine breaks, you have nothing, and the heat is back in minutes. But there is an older idea of cooling, and it is the one this whole country was built on. Cooling is not something you make, it is something that happens when you move heat from one place to another and let it go. You do not manufacture cool, you usher heat out the door, and you slow down how fast new heat comes in. Water does the first job, shade and moving air do the second. That is all cooling has ever really been. And the oldest tool for moving heat out is the one happening on your own skin right now. When you sweat and a breath of air crosses your arm, you feel cool. Not because the air is cold, it may be blazing, but because the water on your skin is turning into vapor, and water cannot become vapor without taking a load of heat along with it when it goes. It steals the heat off your skin to make the leap. That theft is the cool you feel. Move air across anything wet, and the air comes out the far side a little cooler because it left some of its heat behind in the water it carried off. A wet cloth in a window does it. Wet stone at your doorstep does it. A damp reed screen does it. This is the engine. Everything I'm about to show you runs on it. Now here is the part I almost left out. 700 years ago, a monk named Kenko sat down and wrote a book of small thoughts that the Japanese have kept and read ever since. In it, he wrote one line that every builder in this country once knew by heart. He wrote that a house should be built with the summer in mind. Winter, he said, you can endure anywhere. You can always put on another layer, build up the fire, close the room down small. But a house that is wrong in summer is unbearable. And there is no fixing it once it is built. Build for the summer, build for the heat. For most of this country's history, that is exactly what people did. The house was built to breathe. Deep roofs threw shade over the walls. The whole front of the house opened up and slid away so the wind could walk straight through it. Reed screens softened the sun. Water was thrown on the ground morning and evening. The house worked with the heat instead of locking the doors against it. And then, in the span of about one lifetime, that was thrown away. Not because it stopped working. It works as well today as it did 700 years ago, and I am living proof in a house older than every machine you own. It was thrown away because somebody figured out that a sealed box with a machine bolted to it could be sold, and then the machine could be sold again, and the power to run it sold every single month for the rest of your life, and a new machine sold when the old one finally died from overwork. A reed screen you buy once for $7 and use for 10 summers. Nobody can build a business on that. So nobody told you about it. Not a meeting, not a plot. Just a long, quiet agreement among everyone who profits to talk only about the machine and never about the screen. That silence is 50 years old now in your country and increasingly in mine, and you are standing right at the end of it. So let me hand you back the part they left out. Here is the thing about heat coming into a room. The worst of it does not sneak in through cracks. It pours in as light. Sunlight hits your window glass, passes through, lands on your floor and your furniture and your walls, and turns into heat right there, inside the room, in the place you are sitting. Once it is inside, it is yours to deal with. A curtain on the inside of the glass does almost nothing about this, because by the time the light reaches the curtain, it is already in the room. The curtain just gets hot itself and radiates that heat right back at you. To stop it, you have to stop the light outside the glass before it ever gets in. That one fact is the whole reason the reed screen exists, and it is why a $7 screen on the outside beats a $60 blind on the inside every single day of summer. So here is what I want you to do, and it will cost you about $7 and take you 15 minutes. Go and find what we call a sudare, or its larger cousin, a yoshizu, a screen woven from thin split reeds or bamboo, held together with cotton string. You have seen them in photographs of Japan without knowing the name. A small one made for a window runs about $7. A tall one that leans against the wall to cover a whole doorway or a glass slider runs a little more. If you cannot find a true reed screen where you live, a roll of thin bamboo fencing from a garden store is the same idea and works the same way. What you want is a loose, woven mat of dry plant stalks, something the breeze can pass through but the sunlight cannot. You hang it on the outside. This is the part people get wrong, so hear me. On the outside of the window, the outside of the door, the outside of the glass, between the sun and the house, not between the glass and your face. A small screen hooks over the top of the window frame. A tall one simply leans against the wall under the eave, its foot resting a hand's width out from the building so air can rise up behind it. You want it standing in the path of the sun. On the side of the house the sun beats hardest. For most of you, that is the south and the west. The afternoon side. That is where the screen earns its keep. Used dry, that screen is already doing two jobs. It is throwing shade on your glass so the light never gets inside to become heat. And because it is woven loose, not solid, the breeze still slips through it, so you have not traded away your wind to get your shade, which is exactly the trade a solid shutter or a heavy curtain makes, and exactly why they turn a room into a closed jar. Now you make it do the third job. In the morning, and again in the evening, you wet it. A dipper of water, a cup, a spray bottle, the gentle fall of a garden hose, it does not matter how. Wet the screen until it is damp clear through, not dripping, just dark with water like a wrung-out cloth. Now every breath of air that comes through it on its way into your house has to cross all those wet reeds first, and it gives up a little of its heat to dry them as it passes. The air arrives cooler than it left. Shade, breeze, and evaporation, all in one woven mat that cost you the price of a sandwich. And then there is the ground. This is the oldest piece of all, and the one I want you to try tonight, even if you buy no screen at all, because it is free. We call it uchimizu, throwing water. At the end of a hot day, when the sun has dropped behind the ridge but the stone and the pavement are still breathing heat up at you, you take water, wash water, rain barrel water, anything but your good drinking water, we never waste clean water on it, and you throw it out across the ground in front of the house. The hot stone drinks it, and then, as the water lifts back off into the evening air, it carries the heat of the stone up and away with it. The ground cools, the air just above the ground cools, and if you have opened the house on the far side, that cooled air is the air that gets drawn in. My grandmother did this every morning before the heat and every evening as it broke, and the sound of it, the long hiss of water meeting hot stone, was the sound of summer in this valley. She was not cleaning. She was not watering the plants, though the plants were glad of it. She was reaching down and pulling the heat up off the earth before it could come into her house. Now I have to be as honest with you as my grandmother was with me, because here is where people oversell this, and I will not. Evaporation cools best when the air is dry and thirsty. In a dry place, the high desert, the inland west of your country, wet a screen and throw water on the ground, and the air pulls that water off fast and hard, and the drop you feel is real and large, several degrees, plain on the skin. But where I live, the summer air is already heavy with water, as humid as your Gulf Coast and your deep south. Air that is half full of water cannot drink much more, so the cooling it gives back is gentler, a couple of degrees, not a plunge. I will not stand here and tell you a wet reed screen will cool a humid room the way a machine does in a Houston August. It will not, and anyone who tells you so is selling you something. But hear the other half, because it matters more than people think. The shade works everywhere, dry or wet, full stop. Stopping the sun before it enters your room is the single biggest thing you can do about the heat, and the screen does that no matter how thick the air is. And the timing saves the rest. You do not throw the water at noon. You throw it in the cool of the morning and the break of the evening, when the air has the most room to take it and the cooling counts the most. Used right, on the hot side of the house, wetted at the right hours, that screen takes the cruelty out of the heat even here, in one of the hottest valleys in the country. I would not have lived this house's life without a machine in it if it did not. The screen and the water are what you can buy and do this weekend, but they sit on top of something larger that costs nothing at all, and if you understand it, you will get more out of $7 than your neighbor gets out of a $3,000 machine. A house cools when air moves through it, not into it, through it. One window open is a stuffy room with a hot patch by the glass. Two windows open, on opposite sides of the house, and the whole place becomes a channel for the wind. Our old houses were built almost entirely on this one idea. The walls were not walls the way yours are. They were sliding screens of paper and wood, light enough that a child could lift them out entirely, so that on a hot day the whole south face of the house simply opened and disappeared, and the breeze came off the garden, crossed the rooms and went out the back. The house in summer was less a box than a roof set on posts with the wind passing under it. You do not have sliding paper walls, but you have windows, and the law is the same. Find the cool, shaded side of your house, the side that has been out of the sun, usually the north, and open the low windows there. Then open windows up high on the opposite, hotter side. The hot air, which has risen to the top of the room, runs out the high openings, and as it leaves, it reaches back and pulls the cooler, shaded air in through the low ones. The house breathes. You will feel it move past your ankles. Two windows and a little understanding, and you have a current running through your home for nothing. The roof matters too. Look at any old house in this country, and you will see the roof reaches far out past the walls, throwing a deep shadow down over them, over the windows, over the wooden porch we call the Ngawa that runs along the south face. That shadow is not decoration. In summer, when the sun rides high, the eave shades the whole wall and keeps the sun off the glass all day long. In winter, when the sun hangs low, it slips in under the eave and warms the rooms. One roof, built once, doing the right thing in both seasons, with not a single moving part. My great-grandfather did not have a degree in anything. He had a handsaw, a string line, and the knowledge of how far to push the roof out handed to him by the man who taught him. "Build for the summer," the monk said, "and the winter takes care of itself." And the last of it is simply this: do not make heat you do not have to. Do your hot cooking in the cool of the morning, not the cruel afternoon. Turn off the lights and the machines that run warm and sit there glowing all day. In the old houses, the kitchen fire was often set in its own little wing, or the hot summer cooking moved outside the house entirely, so the heat of the fire never got into the rooms where the family rested. You would be surprised how much of the heat trapped in a closed modern house was made by the people inside it, and then sealed in with them. I want to give you two more small things, because they are part of how we live with the heat, and I think you should have them. The first is the green curtain. Outside the south windows of houses all over this country in summer, you will see a net of string strung from the ground up to the eave, and growing up that net a living curtain of vine, bitter gourd, morning glory, cucumber. It is the reed screen made of leaves. It throws a deep, breathing shade on the wall, and because the plant is alive, every leaf of it is drinking water up through the roots and breathing it out into the air, cooling the air around the window the same way your wet screen does. Only the plant wets itself all day for free out of the soil. A few seeds and a net of string in the spring, and by the worst of the summer you have a wall of cool green over your hottest windows and a basket of vegetables besides. The second I will be honest about, because it is not cooling at all, and yet I would not pass a summer without it. By the eave, where the breeze comes through, we hang a small glass or iron bell with a strip of paper tied beneath it, a furin. When the air moves, even the slightest stir you might not feel on your own skin, the bell rings, a thin, cool, high note. It does not lower the temperature by a hair. What it does is tell you the air is moving, and something in the mind hears that sound and feels cooler for it. I will not pretend it is physics. It is older than physics. But on a still, heavy evening, the moment that bell finds a breath of wind and rings, the whole house feels as though it has finally exhaled. Hang one where your breeze comes in. It costs almost nothing, and it will teach your ear to find the wind. So, look at what we have. A reed screen for $7. Water thrown on the ground for free. 2 windows opened with a little understanding, for free. A roof your grandfather's builders already knew how to make. A net of vine for the price of a packet of seeds. None of it can be patented. None of it breaks. None of it sends you a bill. And all of it together kept whole families cool through the hottest summers this country has, for centuries, with not 1 watt of power. And every piece of it was quietly set aside in favor of a machine in a box. Not because the machine is better at keeping you cool, but because the machine can be sold and sold again and fed every month forever. You were not told you had a choice. The choice was made for you by people who do not profit when you are capable on your own. That is the thing I want to sit with you. Not that the machine is evil. It is a fine machine. And on the very worst nights I understand reaching for one. But that you were handed only the expensive, fragile half of the answer, and the cheap, durable half, the half that has worked for 700 years, was left out of the conversation because no one could make a living telling you about it. So here is your weekend. Buy 1 reed screen, a sudari or a yoshizu, or a roll of thin bamboo fencing, about $7. Hang it on the outside of your hottest window, the afternoon side, where it shades the glass but the breeze still slips through. In the morning and the evening, wet it through with water that is not your drinking water. Throw a dipper of that same water across the hot ground outside your door as the sun goes down. Open a low window on the shaded side of the house and a high window on the hot side, and let the place breathe. If you have a patch of soil under a south window, push a few morning glory seeds in and string up a net for them to climb. And do your hot work in the cool hours, not the cruel ones. That is the whole of it. $7 the first time, and almost nothing after. By next week, you will be sitting in a room the heat has loosened its grip on, with the wind walking through your house and a small bell finding it at the window, and no meter spinning anywhere on your account. Tell me in the comments where you live, how hot it gets, and whether your summers are dry or wet, because it changes what you should expect. I read everyone. Next time, I will show you the deep pit my great-grandfather dug beneath this house that keeps food cool all summer with no ice and no electricity at all. Until then, keep the wind moving, let the water do the work, and remember, the people who kept their families cool through 1,000 summers with nothing but water and reeds and the shade of a good roof, knew things we are only just beginning to remember.